Alrighty, and we're live. So we are going to be talking about this subject is fascinating, personally. Thank you, Spray Arm, actually, for your feedback. Talking about Mark 16, 9 through 20. Got a chance to review some of this material earlier today, and wow, it is quite a textual issue. It's got some interesting history to it, which I am looking forward to delving into. And one of the things that I appreciate about our channel too is that in the future I can actually get to Mark Riddle's and James White's debate that they had, but I don't have to do it tonight, which is nice. So that can be put off to another time and place. So, and tonight I don't plan to do a lot of conspiracy theorizing, but you might want to stick around because there's actually a modern textual critical conspiracy theory, which is kind of funny, regarding Mark 16, 9 through 20. So we're going to get into that. Lying behind the modern Bible version controversy is a dark and ancient conspiracy which is undermining Christianity and our civilization at this very moment. My name is Joseph Armstrong. Welcome to the Bible version conspiracy. If you enjoy your King James onlyism with a dash of conspiracy, like we do, go ahead, do yourself a favor, and hit the subscribe button. It'll take you less time than it takes to read any given verse of the Message Bible, and it's guaranteed to not leave the same bad aftertaste. Join us on our weekly on our journey down the rabbit hole as we create weekly content exposing the Bible version conspiracy. Get secret updates, discounts in our online shop, and other exclusive content by becoming a co-conspirator at our Buy Me a Coffee link below this video. And it is our conspirators, our co-conspirators, whom we thank for making all of this channel's content, including this stream, possible. Thank you to all of you. We are making some plans for the future, just so you guys are aware. Making live things a little more members exclusive. So like for the members more. I am thinking of making this live stream private for co-conspirators only, and then making an edited version of it for the public. And that way I think we may be able to create more short videos, ones that are more concentrated. We'll have more opportunity to work with the live streams behind the scenes, I think, and try to figure some things out. Yes, Daniel Jones, thank you for showing up. We've got 3 of our co-conspirators live right now. Charles, Stephen, and Daniel. Thank you all very much. And I just started for this live stream. Moving forward, we'll be listing our co-conspirators in the description. We have one co-conspirator that I'm waiting to hear whether or not they want to be, or she wants to be listed in the description or not. But we shall see. So stick around, like I said, because later on we're actually going to hear a little bit about a conspiracy theory that is not a King James only conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy theory made by the people who don't think Mark 16, 9 through 20 should be in the Bible. It's kind of funny. Okay, so we I mentioned that. So yeah, if you guys want to, join us for the live stream in the future, then, become a Buy Me a Coffee member, and then you'll have your place guaranteed. And we'll keep letting people know that, even as we update things and stuff like this, that it'll be if you want to join us for the live recording of this, then you can become a member and stuff. So that, I think, would help give something a little extra as well to the co-conspirators. And I still really, 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 really want to figure out a second stream for the co-conspirators. If you guys can message me back in the Buy Me a Coffee app, if you can let me know, if you're hearing this, whether you would rather jump into Jardis Bow's Book of Bible Problems, dealing with contradictions, mistranslations, stuff like that, or if you would rather jump in with King James's demonology. Let me know which one you would rather have us start with for the live stream for members only. And if you have a preferred day of the week that it could happen on. Friday is great because, Saturday is, pretty much everybody's day off. So being able to stay up a little bit later on Friday is not really a big deal. But that's what we do this stream on that day for. So if there's a day of the week that works better for you guys, please let us know. That would be sweet. All right. So I think I'm going to wait on the question of the week, because right now we're at 6 people. Might hold on to that for a little bit. Well, actually, let's just go ahead. Today's question of the week, we're dealing with textual criticism, textual variants, stuff like that. If you guys are getting some value out of this video so far, smash that like button, share the video if you feel like it. If you don't like the video, send it to one of your enemies. That way they can actually dislike you even that much more. So the long ending of the Gospel of Mark is in the majority of Greek manuscripts. 3 end at Mark 16:8. 3. And it's the weight of those 3 that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. There are 6 or 7, I think, manuscripts right now that have an alternative ending to Mark, and we'll deal with that in a little bit. So, but anyways, who even knew, outside of the people that read the notes in their modern versions, or people that have been dealing with this for a while? Question of the week. Unresolved textual issues can be disturbing to faith in the Bible. That's why when anybody ever talks about textual variants, they are always sure to start talking about, they lead off with, the New Testament is the most historically the most widely attested to, the most supported by a rich textual history, which is available and consultable. There are so many works of ancient literature which are not, but might only have like a handful of manuscripts to their name. But the manuscripts of the Bible are just, there are thousands of them, and it's so well attested, and there's barely any differences between any of them. They'd all fit on a single page, and we know exactly which ones should and shouldn't be in there. And your modern version basically is 99.99999% accurate. That's what they say. But, and then they start talking about the textual issue, why your King James Bible is defunct. Basically is what the plan is with most sermons that deal with this kind of stuff. So anyways, unresolved textual issues can be disturbing to faith in the Bible in general, not just the King James Bible, but just be disturbing to faith in the Bible. Because, well, how do we even know what text and everything like this? So unresolved textual issues can be a problem. Here's the question. What text issue has bothered you in the past, and how was it resolved? So, for me, there's been 1 John 5:7 was a big one, and I studied that for a long time, and just like, wow, that's a legit verse, but a huge and ancient controversy. There are other things like with the Septuagint that I'm kind of like on, still trying to figure those out. But if you guys can let me know from your perspective, what textual issue has bothered you the most and how was it resolved? That would be great to know, and that would give me some more further something to think about moving forward with the different issues that we tackle with this channel. So right now we're in a series called Invulnerable. This will be part 4 or 5, something like that. I can't remember. Today we're dealing with Mark 16:9-20 as it's found in the King James Bible. Next week, I hope to deal with 1 John 5:7, but that's for the future. I watched a video by a man named Jeff Riddle, who is a Reformed Baptist pastor in, I want to say, Virginia, I think. And he started his lecture, part 2, on Mark 16:9-20, by referring to a sermon by John MacArthur, who has recently passed away. John MacArthur, I have not listened to the sermon yet, but I plan to. The only thing that I was able to listen to leading up to this live stream, this current live stream, is Jeff Riddle's response to what John MacArthur said. John MacArthur made a video about the fitting ending to Mark, which is Mark 16:8. And the last 12 verses of Mark, which would have been defended by Bergen in his book that was called The Last 12 Verses of Mark, I believe. The link to that will be in the description, so you guys can pick up a copy if you want. He said that those last 12 verses are spurious and should not be used for doctrine. The reason why they would be saying that it should not be used for doctrine is not because of the incarnate Christ that is in those last 12 verses. It's not because of going forth and preaching the gospel in those last 12 verses. What it is usually a kind of reactionary way of approaching things, which is sloppy and irresponsible, in my opinion, is trying to go against the people that will drink things like antifreeze and handle snakes and get themselves bitten and different things like this. So basically, the super strange, charismatic-y kind of crowd, and since it gets a lot of attention these days, and a lot of people tune into that kind of wacky nonsense, the response is, well, we never believed in Mark 16:9-20 anyways, so we don't have to think anything about that, which is interesting because it is like the only, if Edward F. Hills was not mistaken anyways, and as far as my memory serves, he would be correct, that's like the only place in the Gospels that even talks about the signs and the spiritual gifts and things like this that were supposed to accompany the gospel which the apostles taught. And it did. Jeff Riddle uses Mark 16:9-20 to apply these signs and wonders and everything, and speaking in tongues and all this other stuff, to strictly the apostles. I do not see a specific teaching of what would be called cessationism in those verses particularly. I think I have this ready to go. Let me just check if I can go to banners. I'm going to let... This is the entire chapter. Or not the entire chapter, sorry. Verses 9-20 below on the bottom of the screen. The entire 12 verses that are missing, or at least they should be. they're not. Oh, well. Didn't work out like I hoped it would. It won't display a banner that long. Oh, well. So we can read that passage really quickly first. Let me go to my Remarkable Bible. I've been so happy since I've gotten a Remarkable. It's just like everything I've ever dreamed of. I like it so much. So I'm going to go to Mark 16, and we'll start reading at verse 1, I suppose. Mark 16, and when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came into the sepulchre at the rising of the sun, and they said among themselves, "Who shall roll away the stone from the door of the sepulchre?" And when they looked, they saw, and that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. Now, it could be moved. It could be moved. Problem, though, is that someone could have moved it. It didn't take an angel. There was no earthquake mentioned here either, just so you're aware. This is such a loaded topic. I mean, really, it's amazing. And when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. And entering into the sepulchre, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment, and they were affrighted. A young man. They didn't say angel, but it was an angel based on the other gospels that come along. I wonder if this had something to do with the young man that ran away when Christ was arrested, that ran away naked. I'm not sure. Just conspiracizing, I guess. All right, and they went out quickly and fled from. Oh, wait a second. Poop. I'm sorry, I said I need to stop saying And he saith unto them, Be not affrighted, ye seek Jesus of Nazareth, which was crucified. He is risen, and is not here. Behold the place where they laid him. But go your way, tell his disciples and Peter that he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him, and he said, as he said unto you. And they went out quickly and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were affrighted. And that's where the gospel ends, if you read a modern version, which is really sad. And apparently it's a very, very modern idea for that to actually be the legitimate ending to Mark. We'll get into all this later on. I want to lead off by reading to you guys what is actually being called spurious here. Then I want to get into what this guy happens to say about whether or not it should be in there. And then we're going to talk about Jeff Riddle and some very, very interesting things that he had to say about the history of this text. It is a fascinating and loaded history, so stick around. It's coming up shortly. Verse 9. Now when Jesus was risen early, the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. And she went out and told them that had been with him, as they mourned and wept. And they, when they heard that he was alive, and had been seen of her, believed not. After that he appeared in another form unto 2 men as they walked, and went into the country. And they went and told it unto the residue, that would be the disciples, the remaining. Neither believed they them. I believe that would be the road to Emmaus, but I'm not positive. Jeff Riddle actually has a recording where he talks about that. If you go down to the description, there's a link to all the different places where Mark Riddle actually has a file with the name of Mark 16 in it. So if you click on that, there'll be all the different Mark Riddle stuff that's available on Sermon Audio that comes up on Mark 16. So if you want to check that out, you're certainly you're certainly able. Afterward, he appeared unto the 11 as they sat at meat, and upbraided them with their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they believed not them which had seen him after he was risen. This whole ending to Mark is very short and to the point. And again, like he talks about many times in this gospel, he's upbraiding them for their hardness of heart and unbelief. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, including Bigfoot. I'm not sure. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, and he that believeth not shall be damned. Not he that shall not be baptized shall be damned. Notice. He that believeth not shall be damned. Belief and then baptism, because if you don't believe, you're not going and getting baptized. And these signs shall follow them that believe. Now here's the thing where I kind of have an issue with the whole idea that it's actually teaching cessation. Because, oh, and I would love to split this screen. I really don't think it's going to let me, though. We'll see if it comes up. All right, so here's where I don't see the cessation thing. We really want to teach cessationism, that miracles and tongues and all that kind of stuff don't happen because of the kooky wooky charismatic stuff. There is a lot that I would see actually happening now. There's people that get healed, not just because of holding some prophet's sweaty rag or something, but just prayer and people get healed. It happens. Or tongues in the Bible is for speaking other languages on earth, not the language of angels or gibberish or anything like this. And the interpretation of tongues and speaking different tongues that you never learned, that has happened in missionary history. That has happened in our known Christian history since Acts. In Acts 2, they're all speaking different languages from around the world. They're not speaking some gibberish that everybody can magically just kind of understand. Each one of these 12 apostles is speaking each one of these 12 languages, and they went to the people group. Historically, they went to the people group whose language they were speaking. They didn't go all over the place. They didn't just buzz around in Jerusalem being miracle workers and televangelists for the rest of, however long they were alive. That's not what happened. Thank you guys for the likes and the hearts and stuff like this. If you guys are getting some value out of this video, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. It'll make sure that somebody beside you will watch this live stream, and that would be very helpful for us. Thank you very much, since I know that some of you already have. I appreciate that. So these signs are going to follow them that believe. Not this. These signs are going to follow you guys, and that's it. And it's going to end with you. When you die, miracles and signs and tongues and everything are going to be over. Not necessarily. But remember, there's also lying signs and wonders. That's something that needs to be thought about a lot by a lot of people that are like, ooh, wow, look, it's a miracle. It must be God. Not all the time. Not all the time. In my name shall they cast out devils. Wow, that's never happened since the apostles. I certainly hope it has. If somebody gets a devil in them, it needs to get out. They shall speak with new tongues, not brand new tongues that have never happened before, but speaking with tongues that they didn't learn. They perceived that they were unlearned and ignorant men in Acts 2. They shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. That's the one thing that I can't think of a spot in the Bible where somebody actually drank a deadly thing and it didn't hurt them. The taking up serpent thing, though, remember Paul? He was in the islands and stuff, and goes and puts some sticks and stuff on the fire. Didn't know he picked up a serpent. And the beast, type of the Antichrist, springs out, latches onto his hand. He yanks it off, pulls it off, throws it back in the fire, and he doesn't die. And all the natives are sitting there going, he's going to die. Oh, he's going to die. He's going to die right now. He's not dying. Hey, you seeing what I'm seeing, right? He's not dying. Ooh, he must be a god. You know, this actually happened. And then there's a bunch of wackos that are like, ooh, I can just, look, I'm having faith by picking up a snake. There's faith, and then there's thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Read the Bible. Okay, just read the Bible. And interestingly enough, this is verse 18, where it's talking about the beast and the deadly thing. Interesting, because 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. It shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. So then, after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven. By the way, just as a note, if none of these verses are actually part of the Bible and should actually be in the Bible, that makes Mark's gospel the only gospel without Christ's appearance after his death. It's got an angel in the tomb and stuff, but no actual Christ showing up. That is very significant because it is believed by modern textual criticism that Mark was the first gospel written, even though historically it has been considered Matthew to be the first one written. That's why it's listed first, to my knowledge. And then John was the last one written, so it's listed last. I think it was Origen also of Alexandria that said that Matthew was written first. I don't remember if he said it was written in Hebrew, though, or not. I don't remember if he said that. I don't know. Anyways. And sat on the... So then after the Lord... This is verse 19. So then after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven and sat on the right hand of God. And they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them, and confirming the word with signs following. Amen. Guys, this is a new peak. We have 11 viewers. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it. If Mark 16:9 through 20 is not legit and does not belong in the Bible, it is also the only gospel that does not end in the word amen. Very, very interesting. So we have the famous, the illustrious, the erudite, the intelligent, the amazing James White, who has done a lot of good work for God. But he's also done a lot of harm to people that believe the King James Bible and made a lot of them upset, myself included, and just it's been sad. But I appreciate his consistency in a lot of different things, and I appreciate him trying to do the best that he knows how, which can be a good thing. So here's what he says, which I don't agree with, about Mark 16:9 through 20, and the endings of Mark, the endings, like we mentioned earlier. This is on page 316 of his, whatever edition this is, updated and expanded second edition, page 316. It is found in nearly every New Testament manuscript. It is the longest single New Testament textual variant, and it is the focus of much attention on the part of KJV-only advocates. The long ending of Mark's Gospel, Mark 16:9 through 20. And that's true. We dedicate a lot of time to it. It is easy to understand. Now, there are a lot of people that are not King James only, like Mark Riddle, who would be more kind of Textus Receptus only, I suppose, and more traditional text, or however you want to talk about it. And they would defend the chapter. They would defend these verses, historically speaking, but they wouldn't necessarily be a wacky King James only conspiracy theorist. It is easy to understand why this passage preaches so well. Only the dreaded, hated Aleph and B, that would be Codex Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, and one other manuscript do not have the passage. The other manuscript, I'm pretty sure, was, if my memory serves me right, it's like a 12th century manuscript or something like this, and there's people that contend that it's just not there because the manuscript was damaged, so that's why it doesn't actually include it. And one other manuscript do not have the passage, and even then, room is left for it in B. So Vaticanus actually has room to contain it. Surely nothing could better demonstrate the evil critics' destructive tendencies than their attack upon Mark 16:9 through 20. Because obviously, just because Sinaiticus excludes it, seemingly very purposefully, and that is the sole manuscript evidence for actually getting rid of the passage and saying that Mark 16:8 should be the ending of Mark 16, then yes, obviously, that's just a huge conspiracy to try to get rid of the Word of God. It depends, because this passage has been a point of contention for a very long time, and there's some details that he's going to bring up that makes it so it's not just so clear-cut. There is something, though, that I do want to mention from the conspiracy corner. David Daniels has done a lot of work to prove that Sinaiticus, that would be the world's oldest Bible, complete Bible, that it was written in the 1800s by a man named Constantine Simonides as a draft to a fuller copy that was going to be presented in return for a printing press to the Tsar of Russia at the time. His uncle, I'm pretty sure it was his uncle, was the one who actually put this project together. His uncle was very liberal. His uncle was very much in favor of the critical text as it existed in scholarly circles at that point in time. This predates Westcott and Hort. His uncle would have been very progressive and very much not in line with the people in his area. David Daniels goes into this in great depth and gives great historical detail. So my belief, and David Daniels' belief also, if I'm wrong, please correct me, David, if you see this stream, is that Sinaiticus would have been influenced by Codex B, the Vatican manuscript, and since the Vatican manuscript did not have Mark 16:9 through 20, that would be the reason why there was a, I forget what it's called, like something like elaborate that was put in the column that basically was like, don't write any more of the chapter, just stop right there, implying that there was something that could have been written afterwards. So I have not actually seen that part of the manuscript myself, but to my understanding, Aleph would not include it because Vaticanus does not. And Vaticanus would basically be alone. And nobody would believe Vaticanus, just like they just kind of haven't forever until Sinaiticus came along. Huge, interesting discussion that we can get into in the future. We've done some live streams about that before. And let me see if I can actually add those. I'll try to actually add those to the description so you guys can check out the links for that. Simonides streams. Okay, and we did one on Tischendorf and I think 2 on Simonides, so you can check those out. It must first be said that the documentary evidence for the ancient existence of Mark 16:9-20 is admitted by all. No one claims there is any similarity, for example, between the textual evidence for the passage and the near absence of such evidence for the Comma Johanneum, 1 John 5:7-8. So in other words, Mark 16:9-20 has a lot of evidence for it as it stands in the King James Bible. He admits that. It's nothing like 1 John 5:7, which has no evidence, which we'll get to that. And I'm not sure, I don't know. I'm just feeling really burnt out. Keep us in prayer, guys. Not sure how much longer I'm actually going to be doing these streams every week. I might end up taking a vacation from this for a bit, because the last thing that I want to do is burn out and quit. But yeah, anybody who's watching this who has ever tried doing something like this, you guys know there's a lot of work that goes into it. A lot of stuff that people don't see, and you know that. In one case, it is overwhelming. In the other, nearly non-existent. So for 1 John 5:7, nearly non-existent. So why are modern textual scholars nearly unanimous in rejecting Mark 16:9-20's claim to originality? Well, because if you accept its originality, you're going against the flow of the accepted paradigm. That's not easy. And today, it just doesn't fly. Why do nearly all modern translators, you'll lose your tenure, you won't even be able to get a degree, you won't be able to get involved at all. Why do nearly all modern translations either set the section apart or reduce it to a footnote? And then he gets into the evidence against the passage. The reasons can be summarized under 3 headings: external evidence, internal evidence, and content. Beginning with the external evidence, we note the following. First, Mark 16:9-20 is excluded from Aleph, B, and 304. That's a manuscript number designation. It also is not in the Sinaitic Old Syriac, some manuscripts of the Sahidic Coptic version, manuscripts of the Armenian translation, and some versions of the Georgian translation. So that does not get talked about by Mark Riddle, the different translations there. Jerome was aware of manuscripts lacking the passage. So that would be Jerome that wrote the Latin Vulgate. The revised, updated, Latin Vulgate, not the original Latin Vulgate in Old Latin. Second, the passage is included in a number of manuscripts, including Family 1, 205, and others. I believe F is family. Along with critical marks, such as asterisks and obeli, which would be like double or multiple obelisks, indicating that the scribe knew it was of its questionable nature. So, in other words, they had like a note there, like, yeah, we know this is a controversial passage. And apparently it has been a controversial passage since about the 300s AD. Mark Riddle talks about how there was apparently no debate over it before 300s. 300 to 500, there was a big debate and stuff like this. And then it basically settled into a comfortable spot of being accepted for the rest of the time, but everybody knew about the controversy. Such as, okay, let's see. Quite significantly, there is an alternative shorter ending found in the Latin K and Bobinicis version. And this same shorter ending is combined with the longer ending in L, whatever Greek letter that is, 083, 099, 274, superscript MG, 579, L, 1602, SYR, superscript HMG, oh boy, Coptic, I guess is COP, SAMSS, comma, BOMSS, so the SA manuscript and the BO manuscript, that one stinks under the arms. The Eth manuscript, TH, with superscript TH, MS, comma, TH, so two different things, I guess. What is more, some Old Church Slavonic manuscripts from as far along as the 10th century include only verses 9 through 11 for the longer ending. So a shortened version of the longer ending. So it's just got a complicated history. But like Jeff Riddle said, there's no real controversy about it in the first few centuries. 300s to 500s, there was a huge debate over it. And then from then on, it just has kind of, it's still remained a topic of question, but it's settled into a basically this is accepted now. And we'll talk about why that happened here in a few minutes. We'll get to the good stuff in a minute. Third, Codex W adds an entire paragraph to the longer ending between verses 14 and 15. Jerome not only knew of this addition, but indicated that it was popular in some places. What does all this mean? Benjamin B. Warfield said, now that was the guy that was connected with actually apparently changing the Westminster Confession of Faith to be that we believe the original manuscripts were inspired, and that's it. We'll have to get into that at some point. That's a fun one. Said the existence of the shorter conclusion is a fortiori. Sorry, I just completely missaid that, I'm sure. FORTIORI, evidence against the longer one. So in other words, the very fact that there is an alternative reading is just like, oh, okay, well, the longer one probably isn't real. For no one doubts that this shorter conclusion is a spurious invention of the scribes, but it would not have been invented it would not have been invented save to fill the blank. And that's from his introduction to the textual criticism of the New Testament. It is the multiplicity of readings, so in other words, there's two readings, that causes so many experts to reject the longer ending's originality, not merely that it is not found in two uncials and a cursive. One must explain the existence of the shorter ending and the use of asterisks and obeli in some manuscripts to set off verse 9 through 20, and the long paragraph's inclusion in W, and the manuscripts that put both endings together. There simply would be no need for all these different endings if verses 9 through 20 were a part of the originally written gospel. Really? I could think of some reasons. Say, say for some reason it either ends up missing somehow in a text or whatever, or it gets truncated, cut back to a couple of verses for lack of parchment or something, once. Just once. And then a huge controversy erupts around 300 to 500 and just gives it a very interesting history. And the second reading and that reading coexist. That could cause it pretty easily. We leave, and of course, you can take every other manuscript around you and look at the shorter reading and look at the longer reading and be like, well, the longer reading is the legitimate one. But then there's somebody that's always had this reading their whole life, and my goodness, I'm never going to go for that longer one. That's illegitimate, and yeah, controversy. We have strictly observed grounds when starting to examine internal evidence. We leave strictly objective grounds when starting to examine internal evidence. Here we are looking at the vocabulary and structure of the passage. Many have noted that the ending differs in many respects from the rest of Mark's Gospel. Supporters of the TR have responded by pointing out that by pointing to other passages that, if isolated, would also appear non-Markian or Markan. This area of debate seems unable to provide any clear direction on the matter. I'll tell you what it does show, though, is Bible illiteracy. Here's the thing. One of the things that they actually say, oh, well, this never shows up in Mark's Gospel anywhere else, is the mere fact that Mark refers to the 11. Oh, he said the 11 here. He never says the 11 in the entire book of Mark. That means that he's using a word that is unique to this passage in that somebody used this word that is unique to this passage, and it makes no sense. How could they have used a word that Mark that hadn't used before in the whole gospel? Judas died. That means it's not the 12 anymore, it's the 11. So that first shows that there was some scholarly person who could read Greek and Hebrew and all this stuff, who was a dunce or a knucklehead, and pick your poison, one or the other. Or they were just really desperate, and they were going to impress a bunch of little college kids with, oh, look, this Greek word. Oh, my goodness, I can't believe this. This is just overwhelmingly proving what the doctor is saying. Wow. Anyways, the passage's content often has been criticized, and rightly so. We do not, by pointing out the following items, wish to indicate that an orthodox interpretation of these endings is not possible. So in other words, if we talk about snake handling, it's not because there's no legitimate way to read this passage. It's because there's just issues. Oh, we do not by, okay, we had read that. Many conservative scholars have provided such interpretations, and we can stand by their work. Utilizing the principles of examining other passages that would help us understand or interpret these rather obscure verses does indeed yield a consistent viewpoint. However, the natural reading of these verses strongly suggests that the person who wrote them was not completely familiar with the entire Gospel of Mark itself and was utilizing apocryphal and unorthodox sources. Drinking any deadly thing indicates unorthodox sources, and that's like the only thing in that whole passage that I'm just like, that's actually kind of weird. The first anomaly is found at verse 12. Jesus is said to appear in a different form, and then he gives the Greek phrase. To 2 disciples, well, yeah, because they didn't recognize him. To 2 disciples, most probably the 2 on the road to Emmaus, Luke 24:13-35, it must be admitted that different form could refer to the 2 disciples being supernaturally kept from recognizing Jesus until he had broken the bread with them, 24:16-30 and 31. This phrase seems unusual, though, and it tends to make one think Jesus could change his form at will. Oh, wow, that'd be so weird for the all-powerful creator of the universe to be able to do. With the extreme care taken by the other gospel writers to ensure that all would know Jesus rose physically from the grave, it seems out of place and inconsistent. Now, they also kind of expected him to be dead. So, say his hair looked a little different, maybe. Or maybe he didn't have facial hair. Who knows? Maybe he didn't have facial hair in his resurrected body. Or maybe his beard was different. They wouldn't recognize him. It's crazy. Take this beard off. I did that just like, you guys probably noticed on the streams, like a couple months ago. And it was just like, my kids would have, they were like so weirded out by it. I picked up my son at the one point, and I was like, hi. He had seen me without the beard before that, but it was so different that even at that point, like hours after I had shaved and he had seen me without the beard for the first time, it was so different. He was just, when I picked him up, he's like his arms and legs just like, he was like a starfish. He was like, Mom! So it was like a total stranger, and my wife said it was super weird too. So it's like, anyways, say Jesus didn't even have a beard. I don't know. Writers to ensure that all would know Jesus rose physically from the grave. This seems out of place and inconsistent. Sorry. The second problem crops up in verse, let's see, just one with. So how does it feel inconsistent when they're very careful to say that he rose physically from the grave? Because you don't have to be a spook to be able to appear in a different form to 2 people on a road. They were still recognized him as a dude. They weren't like, whoa, guys, run! Cue the Scooby-Doo chase music. The second problem crops up in verse 14, where we have 11 disciples reclined at the table. Aside from the possible numerical problem, was not Thomas absent? Here we are told that Jesus reproached them for their unbelief and hardness of heart. That is actually kind of interesting with the 11, but that depends. Was one of the ladies there? Who knows? This is out of character given the other accounts of his dealing with the disciples after the resurrection. It is so strong that at least one scribe felt it needed toning down, and introduced the 90-word interpolation preserved today in Codex W. So in other words, they're just like, oh, wow, they didn't need to berate them for their unbelief. That's not what the other Gospels said. So let's make a big explanation and put it in the text. Weird. It is very Markan, though, to actually have a rebuke of their unbelief. The next issue is in verse 16. The conjunction of baptism and belief is unusual, to say the least. In no other passage does Jesus tie these things together so intricately. Now, in no other passage in the Gospels does he really talk about the signs and wonders either. Now, Jesus does then go on to say the basis for condemnation is unbelief, not lack of baptism, and hence baptism does not, even on the basis of this passage, have saving power. But it still presents a phrase out of character with what we know of his teaching from Mark's gospel as well as the other accounts. Okay? I mean, just because Christ gets specific on baptism one time, you might want to think one time too. Because, not that he's not thinking, I'm sorry, wrong phrasing. You might want to think too, because with the signs and wonders thing and the controversy on baptism that it gets into and all these other different things, you wonder why somebody might wanted to have left it out for a while. Kind of like Acts 8:37, which is a minority reading that's hardly ever anywheres. Kind of interesting. Interesting stuff, guys. I tell you what, the textual issues thing is just oh man, just go forever. Verses 17 and 18 present yet another problem. His signs given here are promised to accompany those who have believed, seemingly to all who have believed. Yeah. Wonders do accompany pretty much everybody that believes. But the thing is that we don't all have faith like mustard. A lot of our faith is like ketchup. Sorry. It makes no sense now that I think about it. Anyways, not all of us have the faith like a grain of mustard seed. I don't think. Because like even a lot of the time I'll be like, I know that praying for, financial or whatever, or who knows what, it's like I just don't, because I'm just like, it's not going to do anything. But what's the harm of actually? There's nothing lost. I mean, there's just things to gain. There's nothing to lose from praying. Just that I think that God answers prayer more when he knows that you're going to recognize him as the one that did it. Because you asked. All right. The signs given are okay. This again has no real counterpart in any other passage. Certainly, Paul was bitten by the serpent and felt no ill effects. But even that story does not remove Christians from the natural consequences of life. Yeah, it doesn't, because you don't just have natural consequences of life. A person can be bitten by a poisonous serpent and suffer no harm due to the snake not releasing any venom. Not an uncommon occurrence. Yeah, that also kind of depends a bit. They were shocked that he didn't because, like grabbed onto him and stuff. A strike sometimes can be a warning. Possibly Paul's experience shows God's sovereignty over creation and his control over every animal life more than it shows Paul's ability to be poisoned and yet survive. Okay, James. You can tell you're a Reformed Baptist. I'm sorry, maybe. I'm sorry. For the Reformed Baptist people that watch this and enjoy this stream, I get it, okay? You guys are cool for the most part, I'm sure. But you would kind of tend to think of the naturalistic kind of explanations for, miraculous things that happen to kind of come from Reformed. And then Baptist to boot, it's like no supernatural, nothing, and it's just like, okay. Possibly Paul's experience shows God's sovereignty over his creation. Okay. These verses are reminiscent of many apocryphal writings that are circulating after the close of the New Testament period. Many apocryphal writings. I would like to see that. The different apocryphal stuff and the maybe crazy Gnostic stuff that just has all the, oh wow look, this is, and that's the thing too. Because those apocryphal writings are going to have things like drinking poison and being bitten by snakes and stuff like this. because they're trying to show how legit they are in being aligned with what the Bible says at that point in time in Mark 16. Interesting. What can we say then about Mark 16, 9 through 20? We can speculate about how the longer ending arose. Did Mark issue two versions of his gospel, adding the longer ending later? No one can say, but that would certainly amount to the various endings now in existence. That depends. That kind of depends, because that would take the controversy really, really early. And as far as Jeff Riddle's aware, and as far as I'm aware, there's no controversy that predates, what is it, the 300s or so, or 3rd century? I forget. More likely, early scribes felt the abrupt ending of Mark lacked the necessary proclamation of the resurrection, and thus some parallel corruption took place, drawing from oral stories and other gospels to create the longer ending. So that would be, I'm not sure if White accepts Mark as the first gospel. If he does, then he wouldn't think that Matthew, Luke, and John would be existing before Mark was actually created. So they would be aligning Mark to the Gospels that are in existence at that point. Whatever the case may be, regarding the genesis of Mark's various endings, we can say that given the external evidence, we believe every translation should provide the passage. However, we also believe that every translation should note that there is good reason to doubt the passage's authenticity. Allow the readers of Scripture to be diligent, 2 Timothy 2:15, or to study to show themselves approved, in their own studies and come to their own conclusions. And you can see, I put a note in here. You can see Bergen's last 12 verses of Mark on that question. So in other words, James White's big thing is there's two readings and I have a problem with that. Either one of them being legitimate, I have a problem with that idea. And when I read the passage, it doesn't sound consistent with the Bible that I know. And that's it. Now let's get down to the good stuff. Glad you guys have stuck around because this gets interesting. This is from a video. It'll be down in the description. Jeff Riddle's Lecture 2, where he talks about, and I jotted down my notes and stuff. We're going to go over that for now. It is an hour and 2 minutes, so we'll be finishing up here in a minute. Jeff Riddle. The consensus of history is in favor of the traditional ending. Conservative men have been led to reject the conservative view of Mark's gospel, or the traditional view of Mark's gospel. And they've been led by the dominance of modern textual criticism to do so. There are many different evidences for Mark 16, 9 through 20 being legit. Here's what they are. Basic breakdown. External, internal, historical, theological, and canonical evidences. So basically, external, internal, historical, theological, and canonical evidences are, kind of grouped together under the same heading. Evidence that Aleph and B's scribes were intentionally suppressing the ending. Like where Vaticanus, completely out of character, leaves an entire column blank where it could be put in. And then Sinaiticus has a big note or whatever that basically discourages the scribe from continuing. So whoever was writing that was like, let's just stop here because There's controversy this way, there's controversy that way. We don't necessarily want to take sides. Or maybe we think that this is where the gospel should end. There's a big problem. We'll get to it in a minute. There's a big problem even thinking that verse 8 could even be the ending. A big Greek problem. Okay, we'll get to it in a second. Justin Martyr quotes it. He quotes Mark 16:20, which would be the last verse there. The Diatessaron, which would be a compilation of the four Gospels into one, if I'm not mistaken, around AD 160, includes the traditional ending. And earlier than Justin Martyr, Irenaeus of Lyon, who, if I'm not mistaken, was a disciple of John, unless I'm thinking of a different Irenaeus. He talks about Mark being a disciple of Peter and refers to Mark 1:1, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and ties it to the end of Mark's gospel in Mark 16:19, where it talks about them going out and preaching the gospel. And not only is Irenaeus is such an interesting dude. Not only is Irenaeus the earliest citation of Mark 16:9 through 20 in 180 AD, he's the earliest citation of Mark. So nobody quotes Mark before he quotes Mark 16:9 to 20. That tells me that Mark 16:9 to 20 probably wasn't just put in there. There wasn't any like, oh shoot, somebody just added this to the Bible. I can't believe they do that. None of that kind of controversy happening in those first couple centuries. If you guys are getting some value out of this video, like, share, subscribe. Mucho apreciado. The claim is that the last 12 verses of Mark just don't seem Markan. They just aren't ringing like the rest of my... It doesn't sound the same. It doesn't... I never really did think that Mark really wrote those. It uses words not used in the rest of Mark. Like we already mentioned, the 11 instead of the 12. And to follow after with a prefix epi to have with signs following. So there's like two words, and one of them is just like, okay, that's stupid. And then the other one's just like, okay, that's minuscule. What's your point? So let's throw out all the passage because he used a different prefix on a word. Okay. Conspiracy theory. The textual critical conspiracy theory. Wow, this passage really looks like Mark wrote it. I can't believe it. Why does it look like Mark actually wrote this? Oh, I know, because we know he didn't write it because there's an alternate ending and the two best manuscripts on earth don't include it. So I know what they did. They made it look like Mark wrote it. They are so clever. They read the Gospel of Mark and made it look like Mark wrote the last 12 verses. Oh, it's all connected. That's actually the idea. I've got a simpler explanation, which is probably a little more likely. Mark probably wrote it, and that's probably why it looked like Mark wrote it. That's just an idea. Throwing it out there, you know, stepping out on a limb here. Doodaloo-loo-loo-loo. Consistent. Okay. Consistent theme of upbraiding the disciples for their lack of understanding and unbelief. Does that all over the book of Mark. And Riddle says, don't let any so-called expert lead you to reject the last 12 verses of Mark on internal grounds because it isn't very Markan. Now, James White and Jeff Riddle actually had a debate about this, which I believe should be in... It may be in the links in the description for YouTube, I'm not sure. But you can see the part that was put on sermon audio in the sermon audio link that searches for Mark 16 under Jeff Riddle stuff. So you guys can check that out there. Okay. There is also a Eusebian letter. So Eusebius, the guy that was supposed to have supposedly put together those 50 volumes of the New Testament that, or of the Bible that were supposed to be given to Constantine or something. That Eusebius, that would have been the father of church history. Not the father of Christian chronography. That's different. That's a different guy. We'll get to him around Christmas time. You guys are going to want to tune in for that. You guys want your minds blown. You guys want tears yanked from your tear ducts. Your tear ducts are going to quack so loud, they're going to go hoarse because you're going to steal all the tears from them. It is an amazing, amazing thing that we're going to read. Just this coming month. You guys aren't going to want to miss it. I'm pretty sure that we're still going to be doing the live stream publicly at that point. I'm planning to hopefully have this all in place, hopefully, for the new year, and then have 2024, which is, we've been doing this live stream thing weekly for about a year. Wow. That's hard to even think about. I think our first one was like January 14th or something. Let us see now. Okay. No evidence of a dispute about the traditional ending in the first 3 centuries of Christianity. Aleph and B, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, if we're even to date them in the 3rd century or 300s, I think is the 300s is when they're supposed to be. If we can even date them in that time frame, then yeah. I really, after the David Daniel stuff and after, I can't even see how we can even push them back that late. The contribution of Hug, if it wasn't for that dude, they'd still be probably someplace in the 800s, or at least Vaticanus probably would be. There is also a Eusebian letter referencing a dispute in the 4th century, which wasn't published until the 19th century, if I wrote my note correctly. And it also doesn't really say where Eusebius stood on it or what the controversy was, really, apparently. 300 to 500 AD saw some dispute in limited circles, leading to the shorter ending between verses 8 and 9. In one lectionary and a few late manuscripts, first evidenced in the 6th century, and that's where 6th century is where your shorter ending comes in. Latest is the 15th. Some modern translations are inserting it as well. If I'm not mistaken, I think the TEV might put it in there too. 500 to the 19th century renewed the consensus in favor of the traditional reading. So 500 to all the way up into modern times. Greisbach, good old Greisbach, I'm pretty sure he was a German higher critic and also dealt with a lot of textual critical things too. Greisbach conjectured, excuse me, that the real ending, my voice is leaving me, Okay. Greifsbach conjectured that the real ending was lost, and 9 through 20 was written as a replacement. Tregelles, who was another textual critical guy, thought that even though it was not original, it should still be accepted as canonical. I mean, I can kind of get where he's coming from with that, but also just kind of like, what? In the mid-20th century, we arrived at the idea that the original ending was 16:8. So this is not an ancient idea. This is not even a thought. This is not even a, oh, there's been a controversy as to whether or not the chapter should end at verse 8. It's just, no. It's a new idea. Completely new, apparently, according to Jeff Riddle. James White's idea that it should end in verse 8 is brand spanking new, which is sad. An avant-garde as existential non-conclusion conclusion for us to finish ourselves, writing like a 20th century author, not a first century author. So like, oh, they ran away and they were afraid and they saw the angel and they're just like, and then Oversville. You get to decide what happened. Big mystery, suspense, thriller, like he said, avant-garde. Oh, yeah. Why do you have this first century author writing like a 20th century author? It's an original idea and all, but it doesn't make any sense. And to think that John MacArthur would have even embraced this is hysterical and sad. If so, Mark would end with a, here we go, a post-positive particle, Gar. I knew a guy named Gar. I think his name was Garnet. He went to college with me. He was actually in my math class. He was from, not Korea. He was from, shoot, where was he from? One of the countries over there was having, he was a refugee, I believe. And he taught me some things which I've hence forgotten of his language. I'd have to try hard and actually remember those, but called him Gar. So it ends with Gar. That's the last word in Mark if it ends in verse 8. And it's considered a grammatical barbarity. Gar is used after the beginning of a sentence, but it's never used at the end of a sentence. It'd be like ending a sentence with for or therefore. So like, it is raining outside, therefore what? Or like, oh, these flowers are not for something missing there. Several authorities say that it couldn't end with this grammatically barbarous way. And Jeff Roll cites those in the video. And you guys will find, if you guys are watching the Facebook version of this, if you're watching this on Facebook, I appreciate it. First of all, thank you very much. Second of all, there should be a few extra things in the YouTube description. If you check that out, there are some things that I actually added to that I wasn't able to add to the Facebook description. So if you guys are looking in the links and stuff like that, there's some things in the YouTube description that aren't there. Okay. It is the only gospel that would not end in amen. The only gospel with no resurrection appearances. some early Christians would have only had Mark, so you can't just say, oh, well, can't we just not have the resurrection appearances? Just like, could we just, well, they don't really need them. It's in all the other Gospels. Well, think about it. Mark going to Alexandria. You wonder where maybe this whole thing might have started, possibly, just saying. They probably only had Mark. Lots of different people probably only had Mark. Mark was the short one. Mark was the one written to, I think, the Greeks, if I'm not mistaken. So, or no, was it Rome? The Romans, I forget. Anyways. Some early Christians would have only had Mark. Clearest text on cessationism, that the gifts ceased with the apostles. Sorry, Edward F. Hills and Jeff Riddle. I don't see that. I read the passage. I don't see that. If you guys see it, please help me see it. But I don't see that. Deadly things and snake bites aren't the only acts of the apostles foretold. Acts 27 would be where Paul gets bit by the snake. And there are a lot of other acts there that are just all over the Bible, that are just accepted, that are just there, that are just, yeah, there's no problem with these, and they're there. It's not like some snake handler went back in time and changed the Bible. Ooh, we're gonna make it so the Bible says that snake bites and drinking antifreeze won't hurt you. And by the way, drinking any deadly thing, it's not because you're supposed to go out there and take a cup of poison and go, oh, look, it's a miracle, I'm alive. Sorry, I dropped the mic. Sorry. Okay. The mic died too. That poison was super. So, sorry if I just blew all your eardrums out. Moving on. It's supposed to be like, at least as far as I'm aware, it's supposed to be like somebody's trying to poison you and you survive. I poisoned that guy. Did you get the right cup? Yeah, I put it in all the cups. Wait, all the cups? Yeah, I put him in all the cups. I wanted to make it so that I didn't miss him, and that if you took the wrong cup, he'd still get poisoned. I drank one of those cups, you moron! Oh, I'm sorry. So, like, you get poisoned and you survive. I'm still sorry for knocking over the mic. Anyways, moving on. Confirming the word with signs following. Edward F. Hills, 9 through 20, is the only account in the Gospels regarding signs, tongues, and spiritual gifts. The canonical part of it is just like, you're losing 12 verses of the Bible now? That's like 2 John or 3 John. Just get rid of it. Calvin was aware of most of the textual criticisms that are popular today. And here's a quotation, or at least part of what a man named Thomas Manton, who was a Puritan. I'm not sure when he lived. I didn't get a chance to look him up. In his commentary on James, he defends 2 Peter, 2 and 3 John, and is like, if you want to take out James, it's not going to end with James. It's going to move on, and it's going to be like, oh, 2 Peter shouldn't be in there, because there was controversy about that. 2 and 3 John is controversy about that. Revelation, definitely controversy about that one. Mark 16, he knew about that one. It wasn't just because, oh, look, we found Alexandrinus, or that one actually has it. We found the Vatican manuscript and Sinaiticus. Ooh, now it's time to revise the Bible. This was an old discussion. Oh, Mark 16, John 8, pericope the adultery, or however it's pronounced, with the woman taken in adultery. Passages in Luke, 1 John 5:7. All these different passages are at risk when you go throwing books out of the Bible. Here's what he said. Where would profaneness stay? And if this liberty should be allowed, the flood of atheism stop its course. I'm not sure how to interpret that. There's a lot of people that warned in Joey Faust's book that if once the editing of the Bible, the retranslating of it was commenced, that it would just never stop, and it would end in debauchery and atheism and homosexuality and just all sorts of evil things if they started revising the accepted English Bible. All that happened, and it happened. Infidelity was supposed to ride forth with a high hand when the authority of the Bible, the English traditional Bible, was brought into question. Where would profaneness stay? If this liberty should be allowed, the flood of atheism stop its course. The flood of atheism wouldn't have to do anything because you'd be throwing out your own Bible. Thank you, Spray Arm. Let me put that up real quick. Thomas Manton, 1620 to 1677. Thank you. So, since it's 11:30, I don't know if my wife is going to want to stay up for a little while. So I'm just going to skim through these comments real quick. Colin, thank you for tuning in. I've heard the boy who ran away naked was Mark himself. Yeah, I've heard that too. Hello, Joseph. My in-laws are watching. That's nice. I'd say these signs of an apostle, 2 Corinthians 12:12, and they were fulfilled in the book of Acts with the passing away. Come on, scroll. There we go. With the passing away of the apostles, these signs also passed away. There's a conspiracy. Okay, I'm going to bring this right up. There's a conspiracy here to undermine the resurrection of Christ. Yes, because if there was no physical resurrection, which I'm pretty sure Westcott and Hort went for the spiritual resurrection and such, which is dangerous, because then there's no resurrection of the body, and then that contradicts everything that Paul ever wrote. So if Mark was the first gospel written and it doesn't have the appearances of Christ in it, not just that he rose spiritually and stuff, but that he was seen in a body, you got problems. When the first gospel written won't go after that one, talk about theological problems you're going to have. Modern critics say Mark was the first gospel written without a clear witness to the resurrection. Yep. Subsequent gospels added it. Thank you, Stephen. Yes, Jeff Riddle. I tire of hearing about all the good things James White has done. Stop it. James White is an enemy, is the enemy. He preaches a false Calvinistic gospel and labors to steer people away from the preserved words of God. I'm not sure that he is the enemy, but Anyways, I'm sorry if it triggers you or whatever, but I can appreciate personally some of the things that he has done for Christianity in general against things that would be common enemies between myself and white, and between you and white as well. So, like, both of you would oppose Catholicism, both of you would oppose Islam, Mormonism, all this other kind of stuff. He does a lot of good, smart things. But the thing is, like you said, he does steer people away from the preserved words of God. I agree. I'm not able to label him as the enemy per se. I don't even know if he was Jesuit educated, like I think Brian Dunlinger tried to claim for the longest time. But anyways, I think that most people have something that can be appreciated about them. I don't want to be completely, oh, they're an evil person, just to try to make myself more popular or something like this. I think I've probably said enough on that point. James White says the reading is Gnostic. Peter Gurry said the reading is apocryphal. Interesting. Thank you, Nick Sayers. And I think that the reason why he would say that it is Gnostic is because of those extra canonical books that are not even really apocryphal. They're not even, like, they couldn't even be considered a second canon. They're just like pseudepigraphal, like, this is, Mark wrote this. Mark wrote this. Yeah. Those kind of things. Those kind of books, the creepy, weird, strange ones. I'm looking forward to actually listening to James White's history of Christianity and stuff. He's got a whole lesson on Gnosticism, and I'm looking forward to listening to that. It bears on the channel. It truly does to know his perspective about that the whole thing. Mark 16:19-20 is authentic. Try it out, you'll see. Brian, adopted son of God. I find it interesting. Yeah, that would be an interesting idea if the originals were actually written in Hebrew or Aramaic. Some of them, demonstrably, I don't think were. A lot of them, I think, were written in languages that they were actually sent to. Calvinist cessationism is poison. But you're supposed to drink any deadly thing. A lot of the Bible is Gnostic, like all of James. Sorry, Brian, that's not true. Yes. Oh, no. James White blocked me on Twitter for pointing out what stuff he teaches that is blasphemy. Good guy. Okay, and we get into the Q document, which we'll talk about at some point. Now we're getting to the Q source document conspiracy for the Gospels. Yeah, the Q source thing. That's where you have Mark being what was that? Mark and the Gospel of the Gospel of Thomas, I think, was supposed to have been paired with Q to make Mark. I forget. But anyways, the Q thing is higher critical. From what I've seen of it, it's total nonsense. We'll have to look into that at some point. And then, yes, amidst the resurrection appearances of Christ. All right. We've gone for an hour and a half. I appreciate you guys tuning in. It's been a good live stream so far. I think it has gone very well. 8 people still around here. I like that. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll see you next time. I appreciate it. Keep your open mind right next to your open Bible, guys. I tell you, the more I learn, the more I don't know. Keep your open mind next to your open Bible, and for goodness sakes, read your Bible like the devil's after it, because he truly is, and there truly is a Bible version conspiracy. Have a good night.